Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ian.is.weird Weirdo. So today I am going to show you how to make my Dropstitch market bag. You can make it in any size you want, any colors, whatever, but this is kind of the base of what I do and the size that I like. So today I'm going to tell you what you need, and then I'm going to show you how I make the bag. So, what you need is at least a 40 pin, preferably a 48 pin, because we're going to be working in the, we're going to be making panels, but we're going to be making it in the tubular mode. So I'm using my Centro 48 pin. You're going to want scrap yarn. This is a necessity. You can't just cast on with the yarn you're going to use. So you want to use a contrasting color. This isn't super contrasting to what yarn I'm using, which is going to be this Big Twist Living in the Lesbian Pride colors, but it's good enough that I'll be able to separate it out. You need to make sure that it is good to go. I do find that after using scrap yarn a couple times, it kind of gets a little difficult to use, so just kind of keep that in mind. You're going to want something to cut, so I use these little snippies, but you can use scissors or whatever you like. You're going to need a yarn needle. I prefer this tiny one, this metal kind of hooked one, because I find it's easier to pick up stitches. It's metal, it's very durable. The machine does come with a very long needle, but I find it's a little bulky compared to the smaller needle. Second, you want something to be able to pick up stitches. So there's a couple options. So the machine comes with a 3.75 millimeter crochet hook. It is very flimsy. I feel like I'm gonna break things every time I use it. So you can use any 3.75, or you can and I'm probably going to be using my clover. I just forgot to grab it. Something else that helps is kind of a like a loom pick, or this is actually a dental tool, but a loom pick or something like that can help pick up the stitches. This one's a little sharp, so it's a little difficult to use, but it works just fine. And then the final thing is any kind of weight that you can add to the end of the yarn. I like clothespins, but any kind of, like, you know, fridge clip or anything like that that's going to add some weight to the yarn is great. So let's get started. Okay, so now that we have our machine, we are going to cast on with our scrap yarn. So for me, I like to find the white pin first. You would, if you're using the Addy, you're going to use the middle of the black pins. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to backtrack, and so I am in the circular knitting mode. Or the tubular. I'm not using the panel, even though I'm making a panel, and I'll kind of show you why as we go on. So to cast on, first, so I'm 2 pins behind the white pin, and I'm going to loop this in, this stitch, and then just normal casting on. If you're new to knitting machines, I would suggest finding a tutorial for that. So I'm going to go around this pin and loop into the white pin, and I'm going to alternate until I kind of hold this until I make sure it's secure and nice and firm in there, and then I actually just go in and put my weight on there as soon as possible. So we're going to keep on doing this until we get to pin 38. So back and forth, over and under. This is the typical cast on method. So you can adjust this to whatever size you want. But for me, I like to have it be this particular size. So, I'm going to unravel this yarn a little bit. And then I'm going to keep on going until, so I am at pin, this is a pin 33, and so I'm going to keep on going until I reach pin 38, which is this pin right here. Now, because we're doing the panel knitting, we're going to go 2 past, so we're going to go over and then under. It doesn't really matter because this is just the end of it. So I'm going to put it in my tension gauge, put the yarn in my tension gauge. So what we want to do is when we, so this is 38 right here. So what we want to make sure is that this right here, right past 38, is underneath this little notch right here. So a good way to do that is to make sure that you go 3 pass instead of 2. Now, I had a really hard time learning how to panel knit, and then once I got my Addy, and because it has the 3 black pins, it really helped me panel knit. So a way to make sure that you get under there naturally is to go 3 pass instead of 2 pass, which is what generally people talk about with panel knitting. So what you're going to do is you're going to pull on your yarn just a little bit, so you're going to create some tension right here to make sure that that loop stays. It's very important, otherwise your shit will start to unravel and will look terrible. So this is pin 41, this is pin 38, and so I'm going to pull just a little bit of tension, goes a long way. You don't really need to do anything special. I'm going to make sure that I don't get around this. I'm gonna pull the yarn over the stitch. It's just a preference, just so it's not super loosey-goosey. A little bit of tension just to make sure we make this loop right past 38, and then we're gonna go the other way, and you're just going to continue stitching. So now that it's in the yarn guide, make sure it's in not only this part of the yarn guide, but in this, otherwise your stitches will be fucked. So we're going back, and I'm not really counting the rows for my cast on because I don't really care. I usually do like 4 to 6. I like things that are even. So here's the white pin. So remember, we need to make sure that once we get to the one we want, this goes under naturally. So if you were to go to the second pin, like a lot of tubular settings tell you to, this would still be under, this would still be over, and you manually have to put it under. For me, I ain't got time for that, so I go 3 past, and look, bam, it just pops underneath. So I do 3 pass instead of 2 pass the needle I want, and it does make a huge difference. So I'm gonna pull the yarn a little taut, not too crazy, and then I'm going to go back, and boom, we're under the white pin. The white pin is gonna be one of the seams, and then we're just going to go the other way. So that's why I use the tubular method instead of the panel method, because if you use the panel method, you can't go 3 past. You have to do 2 past, and I don't like that. It's annoying to me. So I'm just gonna keep on going. Sometimes this last pin gets stuck a little bit, so you're gonna push it down. This is pin 38 that I'm at, so we're gonna go 3 past. So if you were just doing the 2 pass, you would see that this is not underneath this little notch. We don't want that. Go 3 pass, boom, it pops right down. It's so easy. I don't know why anyone does it any other way, personally. So you're gonna pull your yarn a little tight, just a little bit, and then boom, we're going back the other way. So if you have a row counter on your machine, like I do, it's not going to be accurate because we're going forwards and backwards. Here we're at our white pin. We're going to go 3 pass. You'll notice that this is totally loose from the first 2 pins that you use. So you can just drop that down. All we care about is making sure that the white pin is secure. And then we're going to go 3 past the white pin, boom, this pops down immediately. Again, don't know why anyone does it any other way. And then we're going to pull a little tight. This is going to be our last set of forward and backward rows. Here's our 38. 3 past, 1, 2, 3. Boom, it pops under. And then we're going to pull a little tight, and we're going to go back. And I'm going to go 3 past. And I don't like to cut my scrap yarn because, you know, you never know when you're going to do something bigger or smaller. So I'm going to take this out of the yarn guide, and I'm going to pop that in the center. And now we're going to switch to our actual yarn. So, if you're like me, you have a terrible memory. So I like to use the row counter because the counting on the counter on the machine is not going to keep track of your stitches because you're doing a panel. So I have this row counter, and what I do is I go forward 1 row and I go back 1 row, and then I press it twice, and that will help me keep track of my stitches. We're going for 58 stitches in this particular project. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to add our color. As you can see, it's not a lot of contrast, but it'll do the job. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the weight off of this this scrap yarn, and I'm going to make sure that I use that on my next one. So here is the white pin. So I'm going to roll back just a little bit. And what I like to do with this new yarn, so I want to make sure that it gets underneath this particular tab. So I'm going to go around the pin right behind it. You don't need to do a cast on or anything like that. This will be fine. And I'm going to add some weight to it just to kind of keep it tight. And then, again, this is the pin right before the white pin. And we're going to, I'm not going to put it in the yarn feeder just yet, just because I want to make sure that it goes under this thing. And then we put in the yarn feeder. Again, make sure it's in both parts of the yarn feeder, this part and this tiny part. If you don't have this tiny part, you're going to get wrecked. Okay, so we're going to start our first row. So the weight is helping us get a little bit of tension. You can hold it, but I like the weight. So we're going to start, make sure it goes under and under the white pin. Again, you don't need to do the, you know, back and forth thing. And then I'm going to put it in the yarn feeder once I have the, the yarn tensioner. Once I have the, what should I call it? Once I have it going. So we're going to go all the way around. Same exact steps. We have, this is our 38th pin, so we're going to go 3 past. 1, 2, 3, and seriously, as soon as you get to that 3rd pin, it just drops right in there. A little bit of tension, and we're going to go back. White pin, and you see how it just dropped right off. That's totally fine as long as that stitch is in there. So we're going to go 3 past the white pin, boom, drops right down, a little bit of tension. So now you want to up your counter to 2, and then you're going to go and you're going to start your next row. So if you run into a problem like this where maybe your yarn split or something like that, this is a good opportunity to go in and fix it. So you can use a crochet hook, a loom pick, whatever. So part of this yarn has slid. Okay, so we just pulled orange through. So actually it's fine and just look more split than it is. Sometimes you have to go in and troubleshoot. You're gonna make sure that you don't have any like double stitches or drop stitches, because then you kind of have to start all over, or be better at knitting machines than I am, which isn't hard. Now, you may notice if you look at the ends, they're not as neat as the rest of the knitting panel, but they keep your tension pretty consistent, go a little bit hot when you fold it around. They should be pretty consistent, they're not going to be perfect, but if you don't keep the tension, it's going to get really weird, so make sure you're pulling a little bit tight there at the end. So once you've done a couple rounds, even less than this, if the weight is bothering you, it's like clicking around and you don't like it, you don't really need it right now. I just like having it personally, but if you want to remove the weight, you can. Some people have weights that will go through like all, like, you know, will put like, hold multiple stitches and stretch it out. I personally don't have that, don't care, and I've been told by people that it doesn't really matter. So, up to you. So I do want to mention that if you do use an electric attachment for your machine, I would not recommend that for a tube project, a panel project anyways, because you need it to go forwards and backwards, and it's really easy to overshoot your target. So this one I definitely recommend cranking by hand, even if you use an electronic screwdriver. I've heard from many people that like a power tool, like a electric screwdriver, or like a drill is a little intense for your machine and will break it down over time, if not immediately. So definitely hand crank this one out. Okay, so now that we have our panel off our machine, you'll notice that it kind of curls, and this is what happens when you do a stockinette stitch in knitting. So it'll curl a little bit at the ends, but it won't be a problem for a final project. So what you'll notice is that you have your top of your project, and that includes your drop stitches. You do not want to touch this or mess with this a lot right now, otherwise you can really have to start all over, and that is frustrating. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to start at the bottom of your project where your scrap yarn is. So I actually like to flip it. So this is the knit side. You can tell that it has little V's in it, and that is the knit side. And if you look at the back, that's the purl side, and it has more like straight stitches instead of little V's. And so that's going to curl a little bit, so you want to uncurl it with your fingers a little bit. So the boo-boo I made, so do as I say, not as I do, is when I cast on this, the project yarn, I did not leave enough yarn, so I'm going to have to do an invisible knot to make this long enough, but that's okay, it happens. We'll start with the yarn that we have, and then we'll add the knot when we're ready. So, I'm going to take, at the bottom of the project, I'm going to take my yarn that is for the project. Make sure you're not taking, picking up the scrap yarn or anything. This looks so curled around. Let's stop it. Okay, so you're going to put that on your needle. And then what I like to do, I flip it around because my brain doesn't work in that fashion. So what you're going to do is you're going to want to pick up all of the stitches that are at the very bottom. You're not going to want to pick up the stitches in between right here. You're going to want to pick up all of these stitches. And everyone else does this, so I do it. You pick them up all in the same direction. So if you're going from the bottom up, you're going to pick up all of your stitches from the bottom up. And you're not going to include the scrap yarn, so you're not going to include those stitches. You're just going to include the stitches of the yarn. You can do multiple ones at a time once you kind of figure out what you're doing. You don't want to pull super tight. You want to kind of keep it straight. This is where it's a little bit of like art and finesse. So you want to kind of keep the stitches the same width that they are coming off the machine. Otherwise, it can make your bag look a little weird. So once you have put all your stitches on, so I am in the last 2 stitches. So I'm going to pick up the second to last stitch, and then I'm going to pick up the last stitch. Now this can be a little bit confusing, but if you look at this stitch and where it goes, it comes out right here. So this is actually the last stitch. You don't need to pick up this one right here on the side. I did add some yarn. Now, like I said, with tension and pulling it tight, I did try to keep the same size as it came off the machine. It's really easy to pull it too tight or keep it too loose and then have like some weird thing going on. But because this will be the top of one of the sides of the bag, we want to make sure that we don't like mess up the tension and make it weird. So now that you've done that, you're going to take your and like I said, if you have a knot, you have to be really careful to make sure that you don't mess up your tension. So right now what we're going to do is we're going to remove our scrap yarn. So if you remember, we kept our scrap yarn on the ball. You could cut it if you want, but I find that's, you know, I think it's a little wasteful. So what I'm going to do is on the end that is cut, I'm going to just go in and I'm going to start unraveling the piece. It's a little bit easier to unravel it when you have done it in the tubular, like when you've made a tube, but because we did a panel, every edge is going to be a little bit annoying. So what I like to do is I like to pull it and see where the tension is, and then I can start pulling out a bunch of stitches at a time. I don't have to do it one at a time. So I'm just going in and removing the yarn. Again, this is the loose end, so so you can actually take it off without having to go through the entire ball of yarn. So this is the very end, not where it attaches to our project yarn. Now once you get to the final row, you can just take your yarn that's attached to your ball, and you can just start winding that up. And eventually you will get to what's attached to your project. You can just pull that right out because you've sewn up all your stitches carefully. It will just come right out, and then you have to get all of this yarn out. That scrap yarn is not what is going to be in our final project. This is part of the reason why you can't reuse scrap yarn again and again and again, like a million times. At least I can't, because you create a lot of friction pulling it through the yarn, and it just can be a little annoying. So, and it can tend to split. So, you can use it a couple times, but I find that after that I have to kind of switch over. Okay, so now we have this end sewn up. This is the bottom, and it's sewn up. It's even. We haven't dropped any stitches that I know of. Sometimes if you've dropped a stitch, you can make it up, but sometimes you have to start over because you're an idiot if you're me. So now what we're going to do is we are going to separate the drop stitches. So what you want to do is you want to be very careful to not take away the excess yarn. Like, you don't want the excess yarn to come back through the stitches when you are opening up your drop stitches. So you'll notice as you look at your yarn, because you went, when we cast off, we did every other, you'll notice that there are stitches that are dropped, and as you pull them, they become unraveled. So it's a little bit more work at the beginning. You don't get that satisfying, you know, pull at first. But what we're going to do is we're just going to keep just pulling the yarn apart, letting the stitches come out. Now, when you are first starting, it's really easy to drop stitches accidentally, but here we are dropping stitches purposefully to create kind of a mesh appearance. I'm going to let this go because I think it's fine. Actually, I'm just going to put that safety pin, or not safety pin, whatever, clothespin, right there, just so we don't have to worry about it coming out. It's very easy. You just tug gently and the stitches should come right out. Sometimes you can kind of work it like that, or however you want. I've seen people do like really satisfying drop stitches, but I find I never really get that like level of satisfying pull, but we can always try, right? So you can take this to the end. This is why it's really important that you kept that end stitch no matter what. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, so now that so you can see that mesh created. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab just the top of these stitches, and then you can start pulling, and all of these stitches are going to start coming out. So you can just pull like that, and you can see this beautiful mesh start to be created. Now, the end ones, you're going to have to kind of make sure you go in and do those a little bit more manually. It takes a little bit more finesse. You can't just, you know, pull them down as easily as the rest of the project. So, just make sure you get those edges so that they're nice and stretched out. Now, you don't have to do everything the exact way that I do, but try my way, and then you can adjust as necessary. So that's my advice. You obviously do whatever you want, but yeah, so that's what I would suggest. You can just take your fingers and just pull right through all those stitches, and you'll really start to stretch out and see that mesh design, that drop stitch design. It's so satisfying to do. It's very easy to make a mistake. You might have to do it a couple times if you're not super skilled. I'm not super skilled, so I did have to go through quite a few experiments to see how big things would be, and then to try different types of techniques. So you're gonna make sure you get all the way to the bottom. You can stretch sideways, you can stretch up and down. Either way, it's you just want to make sure that you get all of those stitches stretched out. And it's really satisfying. It's like knuckle cracking, basically. It's so awesome. So, and you also want to make sure that this yarn, this little piece of yarn that you have, doesn't come out. Don't stretch it or anything like that. And so now that you have this mesh fabric, which is super cool and fun, we are going to sew up the bag. And I'm going to show you how I do it. You can do it however you want, but I'll show you how I do it. Okay, so now that we have everything stretched out, everything looks good, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start seaming up the sides. So you'll notice that because of the way that we folded the bag, that there are two loose ends at the top here on the same side. So we're going to start on the opposite side, and we're going to seam up here. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your center pull from your yarn, or however you pulled your yarn, because we're going to use both ends of the yarn ball, which can be a little chaotic, can end up in a lot of yarn barf, so be careful with that. But you kind of need this to make sure that it stretches the appropriate amount with the bag. Otherwise, it can be too tight, too loose, and it'll be really weird. So what I like to do before I start is make sure I get the top stitch of the project. So what you'll find is you can kind of trail up the side and really find that final loop. And you want to do that on both the front part of the panel and the back. You can see that it's a little tight here. So, and this is, you know, I'm not great at this if I'm being honest. So like, just do your best. You can kind of tell, especially if you start pulling on the end of this yarn where the, that final stitch is. So, but if you mess up, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world, really, because we can still manage it. So, I think that is the final stitch there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a stitch marker in that, just to help me keep track a little bit easier at the very beginning. So I have my yarn. It is attached to the ball. I haven't cut it yet because I feel like we're going to crochet around the top, and that's going to be a little bit of a pain in the ass. So what I like to do is where I place that stitch marker, I'm going to put my first stitch. And then I'm going to match stitch along the sides. This can be a little challenging because it can be hard to see where the end is. But just take your time and try not to have too many gaps. Make sure you get every row. And then I like to try to get the back loop if I can. Because I just feel like it looks better. But just do your best. It's really easy to not really know where the stitches are just because of how it is. But once you practice, I find it's a lot easier. Something that I do think is important is to every once in a while just like pick up, sorry, there's hair there, I don't know whose hair that is. Pick it up and make sure that you are working on the end, because sometimes it's really easy to just kind of like work into the bag. I have done that before, and it is annoying, so just do your best. And you'll find that some loops are bigger than others. I don't really understand it, so like I said, just do your best. I'm not great at sewing, so I'm not really going to give anyone sewing advice. So if you want better sewing advice, I suggest going somewhere else. I don't know where all this hair is coming from. It's annoying. And sometimes you can't really tell what the back loop is. That's okay. Don't pull your yarn super tight. You want to make sure that it's got some room to stretch. We're also going to stretch it out once we're done seaming up this side, so you'll kind of see how I like to do it. If you have a better way to do it, by all means, you're not going to hurt my feelings by doing it a better way, because it's not an exact science. So once you get to the end, you really want to make sure that you get all of the stitches in there. And then what you're going to do is you're going to stick your needle into the project, and you're going to flip it inside out. So what I like to do is I like to stretch out the project. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, just in the stitches on the bottom, I'm going to take this and I'm going to, well, it's very easy to get turned around. I'm going to take this and I'm going to put a, I'm going to tie it off, but I'm going to make sure that it's kind of towards the end. of the working yarn, I guess. And you can sew in your ends if you like. I find that because the color changes, it's just kind of pointless here. So what I'm going to do is you want to cut off the short end. I have cut off the working yarn and had to do it all over again before. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take that, that seam that you did, and you're going to stretch it out so that it's stretchy with the rest of the fabric. And then you're going to take the excess yarn that's attached to your yarn ball, and you're going to take that and you're going to pull it so that you get rid of this. So you're going to pull it so that you get rid of this excess yarn here. Sometimes you got to kind of work it down. And then from the bottom up, you're going to stretch it so that it's nice and stretchy. Perfect. And then what you're going to do is you're going to find the other end of the yarn ball. So I tend to like to take off the tape and try to find the end. This is where you can get some serious yarn barf action, so be very careful. And then what you're going to do is the exact same thing on the other side with the other end of the yarn ball. So we're going to do that. Don't cut anything off other than the excess at the bottom. And we'll see you in a sec. So now that we have seamed up the sides, we are going to crochet the top of it. Now you will have two working yarn strings on either side. You want to make sure that you have pulled each side nice and long so that the seam is stretched out and won't bunch all weird. So if you notice, on one side we have our working yarn and then we have some ends. What we're going to do is we're going to start on the opposite side. So we're going to flip the project. I am making sure that I am working on the outside of the project, so where we have some of these like loops where it's less like little lines, but it's not a huge difference what you do. I'm going to take my 3.75 millimeter crochet hook, and I'm going to take this working yarn and I'm going to go in and grab the working yarn. I am going to do a slip stitch and then a chain, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put so you can really tell where to put your sorry, my words are not working right now, where to put your stitch. If you pull on that extra string that you have, it'll be the one that gets tighter when you pull the string. So so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do a single crochet, just one. And it's going to seem a little tight at first, but it'll balance out, I promise. So what you're going to do is you're going to take, so you're going to put a stitch in each space, and then you're going to put a stitch in each stitch that we captured, if that makes sense. So here we have our space right here. This is where we did a drop stitch. You're going to put a single crochet. And you don't have to use the 3.75. I just used it because that's what came with the machine, and I was like, yeah, might as well. But you can use up to like a 5.5. I've seen people use 5.5s. But it's just whatever you want. Yarn over, pull through. And then, if you're unsure what the stitch is, just pull that tight thread up, and the loop will become very clear. And you want to just get in the loop so that you can adjust your tension with once you get to the end of this row. Now my brain's like, nope, no, you're not gonna work anymore. So just doing single crochet, you can do any kind of border that you want. I just figured I'd keep it simple, but you could definitely do something really cute here. And that would be really nice to look at. But for me, I'm keeping it simple, but do whatever you like. So you should have 38 stitches by the time that you are done with this half, this panel. You'll notice that sometimes it bunches up, sometimes it's a little loose. You can just keep on kind of stretching your work a little bit. You know, it's going to be tighter than the rest of the bag because you drop stitches here, but, and you're picking them kind of back up with this. Where is my, there it is. But you can keep just try to make sure that you keep your stitches pretty evenly spaced. It's really easy to get a lot of like excess, like loose yarn, especially on the second side of this. But just make sure you keep on stretching your work so that your work is nice and pliable and really fits the look and feel of the bag. Now, like I said, you can build on top of this, you can put scallops, you can do some, like, any kind of detail you want. Just make sure that you are getting the look that you want. So, it's pretty easy, and, yeah. So once you start coming to the end of the, this panel side, you are going to want to put a stitch into the final stitch of the row. And then you just kind of stretch things out a little bit. You'll notice that that loosens up quite a bit, but it's not too crazy. I suggest medium to like loose-ish tension on your single crochets around, otherwise it can bunch up a lot. So what I'm going to do now that I'm at the end of this panel is I'm going to cut the yarn, give a little bit of a tail so you can sew that in, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up, actually, I'm going to do one more stitch, sorry, do one more stitch with the yarn I just cut, and then I'm going to finish it off with the new working yarn. So now what you're going to do is you're going to take your yarn and you're going to go into and do the same thing that you did on the other side, except you're going to sew over these ends that you have, so it's a lot, so it's nice and neat, and you're just going to keep on doing that until you finish the other side, and then we're going to slip stitch into the first single crochet right here. Okay. So we're going to start this panel exactly like we started the other panel, except we're not going to use any scrap yarn. So we're going to leave about a 6 to 8 inch tail. We're going to go around that second pin and put our weight, and then we're going to go around and under the first pin, around, under, around, under, around, and we're going to get to 6, and then we're going to make sure that we go underneath that space under the, right after 6. Sorry, I hope that makes sense. My brain's kind of mush at this point. So, so yeah, so here's the 6th pin, and here is like this little bump. We're going to make sure we go under that, and then we are going to put it in our feeder. Make sure that it is in both parts of the feeder, this part and the smaller part. And then we're going to go back and forth. So you want your strap, or at least I wanted my strap to be, sorry, I keep on dropping this stitch, I don't know why. I've recorded this several times, and the stitch still doesn't want to, like, catch, which is quite annoying. Make sure that this goes under. Go past it 3, just to make sure that it goes under that pin right there, or under that little bump, and then we're going to keep on going and be nice and methodical with it, making sure you go 3 past, give a little tension to make sure that it is on the hook, and then we're going to go back and forth. So this I want to be approximately 19 inches. You can give or take a little bit, doesn't really matter. But for this, you want to make sure it's stretched out from like its original machine like tension, but you don't want to stretch it as you measure it. So we're just going to go back and forth until we get 19 inches or so. Okay, so now that we have about 19 inches for our strap, we're going to cast off. So I'm going to take it out of the tensioner and out of the yarn feeder, and I'm going to go around, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave about 6 to 8 inches, and I'm going to cut it off, and we're going to put our needle on. Now here, in this situation right now, I have my yarn in a stitch that I don't need, so I'm just going to get that sucker out of there. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to pull up every stitch. I'm not going to do any drop stitching or anything, because that's going to make the handle extra stretchy, and this is not calibrated for that. So what we're going to do now, we have our 19-inch strip, is we're going to sew that handle onto our bag. You want to make sure that it's very secure. You want to sew over everything as many times as possible. Really, really, really focus on getting a secure strap, because this is all that's keeping it from falling apart, and whatever you have in your market bag from falling out. And so you want to make sure it's really, really sewn on well. And then you also, what was I going to say? Shit. Yeah, you just want to sew it on very well and be really mindful that this is a security measure. If you need to add more yarn, but it's better to do that and have something really bulky than have something that's weak. Also, it's going to stretch quite a bit, so you want to make sure that you don't make it too long. Make it as long as you think that you need it. You want to kind of stick to a shorter strap, because, you know, you can see, so I'm going to hold it the same place over here, and then I'm going to pull. It stretches about 5 inches on both sides, so that's, you know, that's pretty significant, so you want to make sure that it can handle the weight. So I'm going to get to sewing, and then I'll show you the final product. Sorry.